Hey everyone, it's Nella here, with a video that surprise is not actually going to talk about dolls. Is related to dolls, but is not about them. Um, this is actually about a really strange development that happened as I was creating a character. Um, and this actually goes back to when I first entered the hobby. And I first saw the original official photos of Doll Zone Mo, which I'll include after this video. And the moment I saw that photo, I started making a character because I did that a lot when I was first in the hobby. There weren't as many molds, so I'd see a lot of the same molds over and over and over again, and a lot of the same company photos over and over again, and I'd create characters that I imagined would fit that doll. And one of the ones that stuck with me was Demon Boy, and that was actually his name for a couple of years. His correct name, because I finally did figure out one for him, is Lorac, which is Carol backwards. And he was really just trying to make a character that was very different from all of my other characters. He was very rude, obnoxious, abrasive, just like this real jerk. He's a real jerk and a horrible person. And part of the thing was, and if one of the connections to his story was, he has a half-sister who is part giant, who hates men, and he has a fiance who's like the most pure, who's like this pure, angelic, naive girl, and he's run away from his engagement, and that's how he ended up at the curiosity shop. But then his fiance followed him to the curiosity shop and is still babbling on about, like, oh, how they're going to go back and get married, as all the other as everyone else in the curiosity shop is just going like, why do you want to marry that jerk? He ran away. Take this as an opportunity, run. And then a really strange thing happened. His character kept developing, and he actually developed and got so much more detail that the Doll Zone Mo no longer suited how he looked. That mold didn't suit the character anymore, which, as I said, the character was made for that sculpt. So I never thought, I never even entertained the possibility that that sculpt would change for the character, but it did. So after a good amount of searching, his mold was changed from Doll Zone Mo to Angel of Dream Chen, which at the time the official photo for him had really angry eyebrows, so I was like, that suits the character, that's good. And then his character kept developing. Once I gave him a name, once I had that name settled for him, then other bits of his story started falling into place. A lot of stuff about why he's such a jerk, why he is such a, the world is against me and I hate the world, why he had that sort of outlook on life. Even details about why his sister hates men so much. All that stuff started filtering down once I had his name. And around that same time, I was given an assignment at school, and it was just for us to write a story, and the only thing was, it had to have, we were marked on content, on descriptive detail, because we were learning and analyzing style at the time. So our teacher wanted us to put into practice what we were reading and analyzing. So we had to have like a paragraph of descriptive detail and a paragraph of imagery and a paragraph of dialogue, as well as have it be a coherent story. So because I was really inspired by Lorac's story at the time, I wrote it down. And in the process of writing it down, I realized I had created the most dark world I've created to date. In part because even though he was originally supposed to be like a demon boy, and Titania, his fiance, was supposed to be kind of like a more angelic sort of creature, and then his sister was a half giant, by the time I actually wrote down his story, it was actually probably one of the most realistic ones I've done. The world, as I said, is very dark, in both tone and in style, but it's also one of the most realistic ones I've done. It took a lot. I put a lot of elements of history that I was learning at the time into the story, but I'll just give you quick background on the story. The story starts when Lorac is 16, and about 10 years ago, not quite, but a good period of time ago, there was a war between Lorac's homeland and Hanawa, which is the country where Titania is from. And what happened was, after a very long, drawn-out, horrible war, Hanawa won, and actually is still occupying Lorac's homeworld, which isn't named at all in the story, because I could never quite figure out what name suited it. And essentially, Lorac's people are still trying to rebuild, as the people of Hanawa are resettling in these spots, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened during the war. Lorac was 6 when it started, his half-sister was 11, and his dad was a very well-known pacifist and activist. And in the early months of the war, soldiers came and knocked on their door in the middle of the night and took his dad away, and no one has seen him since. And shortly after that, Lorac and Gunhilda, that's the half-sister, Lorac and Gunhilda's mom decided that for the good of the children, she needed to make sure that there's still money coming in, that they were still getting food, and that they could keep a roof over their heads. And she figured the best way to do that was essentially to endear herself to the officers at the local military base, at the nearby military base. But to do that, she had to be separated from the children, so she left 11-year-old Gunhilda to raise the 6-year-old Lorac. And that's actually part of why Gunhilda hates men. She blames men for starting the war and for leaving women to clean up in the aftermath. So Lorac has grown up with essentially being occupied by the people who have defeated them. He actually works on a farm. Well, he works for someone from Hanawa, basically because that's the only job that Lorac can find. And what ends up happening is that when Lorac comes home from work one day, his mother goes, "Oh, I have great news," and he goes, what great news? Like, we've never had great news. What could you possibly say? She goes, "You go and get engaged. You're engaged," and he goes, "Wait, what? Yeah, who?" So without Lorac's knowledge or consent, it's been arranged that he's going to marry the daughter of a general of Hanawa, quite a distinguished general, and the girl he's marrying is Titania. What's happening is that after Gunhilda and Lorac meet Titania, Gunhilda helps Lorac escape the country, and he ends up making his way to the curiosity shop. But yeah, it's like this dark, realistic world, and it's one of those things where it's so realistic that sometimes I don't like jumping in and writing his story, because it's got so much dark stuff and it's so horrible. Like, I feel so bad for putting the characters through what they go through. But there is actually one last strange development in Lorac's character. He's actually developed the point where I feel like he's actually fully enclosed in his story. I feel like just by writing him, I'm expressing him well enough that I don't need a doll form of him. Which is actually pretty good, because I figure he would either get along really well with Drew, or they would be at each other's throats. And I'm leaning more towards they would be at each other's throats. Yeah. Yeah, but that's Lorac, the strange character that was written for a particular sculpt, then outgrew that sculpt without me even buying him, and then got a new sculpt, and then his character kept developing and is now fully enclosed in his story and doesn't need a sculpt and doesn't need a doll form, which is, probably better for the wallet. Yeah.